the reality of travel for a second. Think about a bustling, chaotic street in Barcelona.
Oh, yeah. Or, the overwhelming crush of a night market in Bangkok.
Exactly. Or even just the way a quiet coastal neighborhood completely transforms when a million people suddenly decide to visit it every single summer. I mean, tourism is sweaty, it's unpredictable, and it is a deeply human experience.
It really is.
But when you look at how modern academic research actually studies this roaring engine of human behavior, they aren't really looking at the engine at all. Instead, it feels like they're scraping off a tiny, irrelevant chip of paint, putting it in a sterile vacuum chamber, and just measuring its dimensions over and over again.
Which leaves the resulting research feeling, honestly, completely disconnected from the reality of the travel experience. Academics are trying to perfectly categorize an industry that by its very nature just defies simple categorization.
And that disconnect is exactly the mission for our deep dive today. We are unpacking a genuinely fascinating and quite provocative academic paper that diagnoses a massive crisis in how the field of tourism is studied.
Yeah, the source material we have today makes a really bold claim. It argues that the academic research studying travel has become overwhelmingly stagnant.
Like completely stuck in a loop.
Right. It's repetitive, it's stuck, and it is largely ignoring the real world. So we're going to look at why the people studying a multi-trillion-dollar industry might be completely blind to the damage it's sometimes causing.
And the author of our source isn't just complaining about bad methodologies either. They're framing this as a fundamental philosophical crisis.
We are going to be exploring the deeply ingrained publish or perish culture.
Yeah.
The isolation of the academic ivory tower.
Right.
And really the structural reasons why the academic system actively avoids looking at the messy, real-world impacts of travel.
So whether you are an academic yourself, a professional working in the travel industry, or just someone listening who has watched their own hometown change because of tourism, we are going to figure out why the people who are supposed to be studying one of the most vibrant human activities on Earth are producing endless mountains of data, but no actual stories.
To understand why tourism research is stalled out, we really have to pull back the lens and look at the underlying scientific philosophy that these researchers are trapped in.
The theoretical stuff.
Right. The source material leans heavily on the philosopher Thomas Kuhn, specifically his concept of normal science, to explain this stall.
Okay, let's unpack this for a moment, because for anyone listening who might not be fresh out of a philosophy of science seminar, what does Kuhn actually mean by normal science? I mean, it sounds like a compliment, but I'm guessing in this context, it's really not.
Far from it, actually. Kuhn argued that science generally operates within a paradigm. Think of a paradigm as this widely accepted framework of how things work, like an invisible rule book that an entire discipline just agrees to follow. When a paradigm is firmly established, scientists aren't out there making revolutionary, world-changing discoveries every day. Instead, they're just doing what Kuhn calls puzzle solving.
Just kind of filling in the blanks.
Exactly. They're filling in the tiny, safe blanks within that existing, rigid rulebook.
And the paper argues that tourism academia is trapped in a very specific, very rigid paradigm. It is strictly positivist, quantitative, and just obsessed with things that can be perfectly measured with numbers.
Yeah, the researchers aren't trying to shift the paradigm or invent new ways of understanding travelers. They're just solving the same safe little puzzles over and over again using the exact same tools.
And the source gets very specific about this repetitive method. It points out that the vast majority of these studies are essentially just asking the exact same question. Does variable X affect variable Y?
Right, and the mechanism they use is always the same. They use surveys, they use CHEM.
Which is structural equation modeling, right?
Yeah, structural equation modeling.
Yeah.
And they use regression analysis, which is an incredibly mechanical, almost robotic approach to complex human behavior.
Let me pause on that because I want to make sure we really understand the mechanism here. What actually is structural equation modeling, and why is it such a problem in this context?
So SESAMEM is basically a mathematical way of drawing lines between a bunch of survey answers to see if one thing causes another.
Okay.
You hand out a questionnaire asking people to rate their hotel on a scale of 1 to 5, and then you ask them to rate their overall happiness. You feed those numbers into an SEM algorithm, and it draws a mathematical line between the two.
Right.
The problem is that it forces incredibly messy, subjective human emotions into these rigid mathematical boxes just so the software can process it.
It's like playing a video game, but instead of exploring the whole map and discovering new territories, researchers are just replaying the tutorial level over and over with slightly different characters.
That is a great way to put it.
Someone says, hey, I beat the tutorial with a hotel survey. Let's write a paper. Then someone else says, well, I beat it with a restaurant survey. Let's write another paper. It's active, sure, but it's completely stagnant intellectually. The paper even notes that the exact same questions from 20 years ago are still being asked today.
And to see why that repetition is so fatal, we have to look at Karl Popper's requirement for what actually constitutes strong science.
Right, Popper.
Popper famously argued that for a theory to be truly scientific, it must be falsifiable. It has to take a risk.
Meaning you have to be able to set up an experiment where your hypothesis could be proven completely wrong. Like if I hypothesize that all swans are white, you can falsify that by finding just one black swan.
Exactly. That's a scientific risk. But the source material highlights that tourism studies almost never take those risks. They test these incredibly safe hypotheses that are practically impossible to disprove.
Oh, like the example the author gives about testing the hypothesis that perceived service quality affects customer satisfaction.
Yes. It's a tautology. I mean, of course, good service makes people satisfied. You're defining the outcome with the premise.
It's a given.
Right. When you set out to test something that is almost certainly true before you even begin, you aren't actually testing anything at all. Because these hypotheses are so safe, the results almost always come back positive, and the paper gets published.
But if these researchers are never taking scientific risks and they're just replaying that tutorial level with safe bets, it makes me wonder what they're actually spending their time producing. Like, if they aren't generating new, robust theories, what kind of knowledge is this?
Well, the author uses Jürgen Habermas's framework to answer that exact question.
Okay, let's hear it.
Habermas argued that human knowledge fundamentally falls into three categories. First, you have technical knowledge, which is created to control things. Second, you have practical knowledge, which is created to understand things.
Control and understand. Got it.
And third, you have critical knowledge, which is created to emancipate people or free them from systemic problems.
And according to the source, tourism academia is overwhelmingly stuck on that first type, technical knowledge. It's all about control and management.
Exactly.
To use an analogy, technical knowledge is figuring out how to make a car's engine run faster. Practical knowledge is asking if the passengers are actually enjoying the road trip. And critical knowledge is asking if the car is actively running people over.
That's spot on.
Right now, academia is just obsessed with the engine. The research is fundamentally just asking, how do we optimize the machine to get more tourists?
The researchers are essentially acting as an outsourced R&D department for the tourism industry. They're building a toolkit for management rather than a scientific understanding of the phenomenon.
Let me push back on that for a second, though. If I am a national tourism board or I own a massive hotel chain, I am paying for technical control. I want to know how to boost my numbers and optimize my engine.
Sure.
Why should I care if the research isn't emancipatory or critical?
Yeah.
Why is that technical focus actually a bad thing?
Well, if you are the hotel owner, it's not a bad thing at all. But for an academic discipline, that obsession comes at a massive societal cost. By focusing exclusively on how to get more tourists, the field completely ignores the second. Practical knowledge of how tourism actually changes the human experience for local residents.
They just overlook it entirely.
Right. And worse, it completely ignores the critical knowledge of who the industry is actively harming.
So by only asking how to optimize the machine, the entire academic field is totally ignoring the people getting crushed in the gears.
And because of this critical void, the field fails to produce any meaningful social transformation. The philosopher Imre Lakatos called this a degenerative research program.
Degenerative.
Yeah. In the philosophy of science, a progressive research program uncovers new truths and expands our understanding of the universe. Degenerative program just recycles old models without increasing its predictive power. It just adds footnotes to old ideas.
The source really makes a compelling case that tourism has become highly degenerative. But, it's very easy to sit here in a studio and blame the researchers for lacking vision. What the source material does really well is point out that these academics are operating within a deeply flawed incentive system.
Absolutely.
These theoretical failures aren't just laziness, right? They're symptoms of modern academic survival.
The dreaded publish or perish culture. The source references what it calls the complaint literature from within the field itself.
Oh, the research is complaining themselves.
Yeah, academics are highly aware of this problem. They note that the sheer volume of publications is going through the roof, but the quality is plunging.
The researchers themselves are sounding the alarm. The source quotes them complaining that they are, quote, writing the same article with different data. They admit they are just chasing citation indexes rather than trying to solve actual real-world problems.
And the source cites analyses showing a staggering symptom of this panic. Over 600 articles in the tourism field have been published in potential predatory journals.
Wait, 600?
Over 600, it's wild.
For you listening who might not be familiar with the academic publishing world, predatory journals are essentially pay-to-play operations. They charge academics a hefty fee to publish their work, often with little to no actual peer review or quality control. You pay the money, your paper gets a fancy official-looking stamp, and you get to add a line to your resume.
And this is a direct mechanical result of the intense pressure to publish. When your job security, your tenure, and your departmental funding rely entirely on how many papers you churn out every year.
You just panic.
Exactly. Academics are forced into a mindset of publishing just to hit a quota. The metric becomes the goal.
If you're wondering why this matters to you, think about the last time your city council cited a study to approve a new mega hotel or a new zoning law for short-term rentals. If that study was just churned out to hit a publication quota or published in a pay-to-play journal, your city's laws are potentially being built on junk science.
It is the ultimate ivory tower disconnect. The crisis of publish or perish affects all of academia, from physics to literature. But the source text outlines why the field of tourism is uniquely broken by this system.
Because tourism carries a very unique burden. It isn't a pure science that happens in a lab, it happens on our streets.
And it is inherently interdisciplinary. To truly understand a tourist destination, you need sociology to understand the cultural impact, you need psychology to understand the traveler's motivations, and you need economics to understand the financial flows.
Right.
But the modern academic publishing system hates interdisciplinary messiness. It demands strict, clear-cut methods and very neat quantitative models.
So tourism is forced into this terrible lose-lose situation. It either has to strip away all that interdisciplinary complexity and stay completely superficial just to fit into those neat little models.
Which is what they usually do.
Or it tries to be deeply interdisciplinary and just gets completely overshadowed by the stricter, older disciplines. Pure economists will look at it and say, the math isn't rigorous enough. While pure sociologists will say the cultural analysis isn't deep enough, it just has no home.
On top of that interdisciplinary clash, you have a massive conflict of expectations between the industry and the academy. The tourism sector demands fast, highly applicable solutions. They want things that are practical, but not necessarily deep.
They just want someone to tell them what color to paint the hotel lobby to make people book a room faster.
Exactly the kind of technical knowledge we discussed earlier. But academia demands theoretical depth to justify publication in a top-tier journal. The result is a mutual alienation. The academy thinks the industry is shallow, and the industry thinks the academy is useless.
And while they're arguing over that, something much more consequential is being swept under the rug. The author takes a pretty firm stance here on the political economy of tourism. Their argument is that tourism is inherently tied up in highly sensitive, highly political issues.
The text outlines this very explicitly. Tourism inevitably involves rent generation, the physical transformation of local spaces, the exploitation of hospitality labor, and the commodification of local cultures.
Big, heavy stuff.
Huge. And these aren't side effects of tourism, they are the core components of how the industry functions.
But because these issues are inherently political, researching them makes the peer review and publication process much riskier and much harder to get through. If your career depends on publishing 3 papers a year, why write a controversial paper about labor exploitation that might get rejected by a conservative review board?
When you can write a safe paper about perceived service quality.
Exactly, a safe, tautological paper that will definitely get published.
Researchers take the path of least resistance. It is a structural avoidance of reality. The system heavily penalizes academic risk-taking, which brings us right back to Popper's point about the lack of scientific courage.
Let's follow that thread, though. Let's say an academic did decide to brave those political risks. Let's say they conduct a groundbreaking, highly critical study on how short-term rentals are displacing local communities, and they somehow manage to get it published.
Okay.
The tragic part of the source material's diagnosis is that the system is designed to ensure the general public will probably never read it anyway.
Because the science rarely reaches the street due to massive structural barriers to communication. First, you have the language itself. Academic papers are written in this closed, highly technical jargon that is completely inaccessible to a normal person who's just trying to understand why their rent is doubling.
You also have the paywalls. These publicly funded researchers are publishing insights that get locked behind a $40 download fee by massive publishing conglomerates. But the most insidious barrier the source lists is the misalignment of incentives regarding formats.
Right. If you are an academic, writing that dense, peer-reviewed PDF is heavily rewarded by your university.
You get a gold star.
Basically.
Yeah.
But if you take those same insights and write an actionable policy report for a city council, or create a plain language application guide for local businesses,
you get nothing.
You're completely unrewarded. It doesn't count toward your tenure at all.
You literally get zero career credit for actually helping people in the real world.
The field only measures impact through citation counts. If 10 other academics cite your paper in their own obscure papers, you are considered a highly impactful researcher. Actual social impact, like changing a city's zoning laws to protect long-term residents, just doesn't factor into the academic reward system at all.
Which brings us to the author's ultimate, frankly brutal diagnosis of the situation. Tourism Academia produces mountains of data, but no actual stories. It builds endless mathematical models, but it doesn't change reality. It writes thousands of articles, but it never touches society. As the source bluntly puts it, academia is just talking to academia.
It is a really harsh truth to confront. However, the author synthesizes a way out of this trap. Small tweaks to the peer review process or minor adjustments to university incentives aren't going to fix a foundation this cracked.
We need a much bigger boat.
We need a total paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Exactly in the sense that Kuhn meant it. The field has to fundamentally abandon its obsession with technical control and embrace what Habermas called emancipation.
Right.
Researchers need to find the courage to take proper scientific risks, formulating hypotheses that might actually be wrong. And they must commit to building Lakatos' progressive research programs that actually deepen our understanding of the world, rather than just adding footnotes.
Above all, the source insists that the field must put the human back at the center of tourism research. It cannot just be about variables and structural equations. It has to be about people.
Because without that human center, the research is just a meaningless echo chamber, completely deaf to the roaring engine of reality outside its windows.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's a heavy topic to process, especially if you love to travel or if you care deeply about how your own hometown is changing. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We talked at the beginning about that unpredictable, deeply human reality of travel and how academia is just looking at a tiny chip of paint in a vacuum. The source made it clear that researchers are hiding from the messy, spatial, and human impacts of tourism because it's simply too risky for their careers. But think about this. If the brightest minds in academia refuse to study the real-world transformations of our local spaces and communities because it's politically inconvenient, who is going to step in to protect our neighborhoods? Are we accidentally leaving the most profound world-altering questions of modern travel entirely up to a profit-driven industry to answer for themselves?